Welcome to the Mandatory, the first live betting show that we've done, Bryan. And it's going to be an exciting one because there's a massive fight coming up. Of course, if you like the content, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on our social media channels. We're at the Mandatory TKO. You can find us on TikTok, Twitter, IG. We'll be pushing all our content there as well. And if you've already been rocking with the show, we do appreciate you. Bryan, of course, lots to get to, some big fights coming up, but which one are you most excited for?
Tszyu, Bryan, Mendoza is probably the best fight that we're going to get this weekend. There's a couple fights that we won't be talking about. One of them being Logan Paul, Dylan Dennis. The other one being KSI, Tommy Fury. I mean, we can if y'all want, but we're probably not going to touch that. I didn't care to. Neither does Shantelle. If I don't care, Shantelle definitely doesn't care.
Bryan hit me up this morning on the West Coast, like mad early, like 6:15, and was like, "Yo, by the way, like Tommy Fury and KSI." I was like, "Listen, you know what? I
forgot it was this weekend until now. Michael Benson keeps posting about it. I'm like, this must be coming up.
The Jake Paul fights, I kind of have grown into. Like, okay, I could kind of get excited for that a little bit, just because the card's usually pretty good. Like Serrano's usually fighting on the card. So it's something to like get excited about. And plus, like, I think Jake Paul's gotten better, but not about him. But I think Tommy Fury will beat KSI really quickly. Who do you think's gonna win that fight? Just in case people are wondering.
Tommy Fury, I guess. No. I don't. David Hay, I think, picked KSI, but like, as I get older, this is a weird thing to say, but as I get older, and I'm not old, but as I get older, I care less and less about what people think, regardless. So like, I don't give a shit if people think KSI is winning. I think Tommy Fury is winning the fight, and if KSI wins, I won't care either, because like, then what? Okay, cool. So KSI is gonna fight Jake Paul at some point. Yeah, let's actually do that fight already. Like, that should be the fight to be made if we're talking about this YouTube celebrity shit. That's the fight to make, and we keep dancing around it. Like, no, y'all should fight each other.
I think they will eventually. I think they definitely will. I think they're going to build up to it. But let's talk about some fights that boxing fans are really going to be excited for this weekend. Some nerd fights, of course. But Bryan, we want to help the viewers make some money. We want to make some paper as well. So it's time for Money Be Green.
Like money, motherfucker? Money be green. Money feel like money. That shit look green to you?
It does look green. Actually, I won some money this weekend betting on football, so that's always good.
I did not have a great betting week in football, and I got my ass whooped in fantasy. Thank you, Ramondre Stevenson, continuing to be unreliable. Don't know
the
why
Patriots
I drafted you.
Didn't put up nothing. I know why you did, because I mean, like, listen, he had a pretty decent
All
season.
my running backs suck. I have Najee Harris, I have Ramondre Stevenson, I have Damian Pierce. I just picked up Roshan Johnson, so pray for me. And I get Geno Smith back because he was on a bye last week. Although I did pick up CJ Stroud, and I don't know who's better. So we'll see what happens.
Right now, CJ Stroud has been playing really well. Like, really, really well. So that's a good pickup for you. I did not know that you picked Geno. This is not a football podcast, but you love yourself some Geno. So another fight, though, that we should be looking forward to, an exciting boxer. Keyshawn Davis is going to be fighting straight up on the money line. He is a minus 2,000. Taking on Nahir Albright, a plus 1,000. A very wide spread there. If you take a look at the line, Bryan, they got Keyshawn Davis as the favorite, as he should be. But how are you betting this fight, and where do you see some value?
So Keyshawn Davis, I don't know if he has a sort of knockout artist reputation, but I wouldn't call him that. He can finish and he has power, but as we see him start to step into more competitive fights against more worthy competition, I think you're going to see less of the stoppages, especially the early ones. When he fought Anthony Yiggett, that was a late stoppage against a guy who had been stopped a couple rounds earlier in multiple other fights. I think that is still his best performance so far. And I think that Nahir Albright, I mean, he has 2 decision losses, and this dude is tough. I think this is a very good matchup for Keyshawn Davis, even though I would have preferred Frank Martin because that's been rumored. But doesn't seem like Frank Martin's going to fight anybody interesting right now, unless it's Gervonta Davis, in which he will lose that fight. But I think that if Keyshawn Davis is going to get a stoppage here, I think it'll be late. But I actually picked Keyshawn Davis to win this by decision. And I bet it at minus 102 on FanDuel. Right now it's minus 106. And it'll probably scoot a little bit more away from even odds as the week progresses. But I think Nahir Albright can make it all 10 rounds. And I think while Keyshawn Davis is somebody I expect to be a champion, at the very least a contender within the next year or two, I think we're going to see him put away less opponents because the guys he's fighting are tough. Unless, of course, they start to put him in there with guys that he should knock out, which I feel like if he wins this decision, it'll be 3 out of 4 wins by decision. That'll be the streak. And then he'll probably get a guy who he should stop in his next fight, who's competitive, but who he should stop in his next fight. That's probably how the matchmaking will go. But I went with Keyshawn Davis by decision at almost even money, which is great because he's a minus 2,000 favorite. And that's how you get value in boxing betting, to be honest.
Yeah, no surprise why Keyshawn Davis is a huge favorite in this one, but a little bit disrespectful to a guy like Nahir Albright, because this is actually tough. In his last fight against Carlos Calderas, I mean, he fought very, very well. He's also been in the ring with Jermaine Ortiz as well, so he has some pedigree, really good guys, very skilled. I think he's going to try to go in there and outbox a guy like Davis. And he has some him to be successful, though, in the middle. The thing with Keyshawn Davis is the fact that, you know, a lot of people, like you were saying, Bryan, and Bryan's talking about my Wi-Fi. Are you able, Bryan, is the Wi-Fi cut now?
Yeah, I don't know why I wrote that in all caps. That was an accident. But yeah, your Wi-Fi is a little shaky. I don't know if you want to leave and come back and do the magical sort of connection thing.
Is it a little bit better now?
It's about the same. We're doing live stream, folks. But yeah, I think Nahir Albright's toughness, which you were getting into, yeah, that's going to be something that we'll look out for in this fight if you want to continue that point. Now you're in the red. I don't know if you actually want to do that. But
let's see how this is looking right now. That's what I want to know. I might have to hop off and hop back on. So Bryan, this is going to be all you for right now.
Yeah. This is hopefully, don't leave me out here by myself for more than like a minute or two. But yeah, to keep it going on the Keyshawn Davis piece of this, because Keyshawn Davis he's had a really good rise here so far, and I think he's one of these guys at Top Rank is really going to be pushing, continuing to do so. Nahir Albright's an interesting match because Nahir Albright is somebody who, as Shantelle was beginning to mention, pushed Jermaine Ortiz and actually got, according to 2 judges, 3 rounds in a 10-round fight against Jermaine Ortiz, who we saw push Vasily Lomachenko, who some people had him winning, but a lot of people had him at least being very competitive, winning 4-5 rounds. I had Vasily Lomachenko winning that fight by just a couple of rounds, just 2 rounds. Thought that he stole it late, but thought Jermaine Ortiz got off to a good start. And Jermaine Ortiz is somebody who, if you can push him, like, it's logical sense that Top Rank would have Keyshawn Davis getting that matchup, because then the next step could potentially be a Jermaine Ortiz or somebody along those lines. So this only makes sense because he won 3 rounds against Jermaine Ortiz, according to 2 judges. So Chantelle's back. And
I don't know if it's good, though. I don't know if it's good Wi-Fi.
Can
you hear me?
We're not doing this for very long, so we can try it, but let's see.
Okay. It was, and we're good to go. So if you can hear me, we're good to go. Quickly, though, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, for the most part.
All right.
And as soon as I say that, the connection gets choppy again. This is fantastic.
Came in, it was like all 5 bars. So we'll try to get through this. If you can hear me, if it gets bad, Bryan, I have to kick me out of here. We'll do it like that. Okay. But as I was saying, for Nahir Albright, I really think that this is going to be a tough fight for Keyshawn Davis, probably his toughest fight yet. And I think for Nahir Albright, like I was saying before, been in the ring with a guy like Jermaine Ortiz, looked really good against a guy like Carlos Calderas. So for me, I think he has to keep the fight in the middle of the ring, because you don't want Keyshawn Davis to start cutting the ring against him. right? He doesn't want to be stuck against Keyshawn Davis. He's got to use his speed. And the one thing about Nahir is he really knows how to use his angle. So when I take a look at plus 1,000, I understand why, but at the same time, a little bit disrespectful because he's very, very tough. And I think he's going to give Keyshawn Davis some problems in this fight. Davis' toughest test, as I mentioned, a lot of people have pegged him to be this knockout artist. I wouldn't say that just yet, but I mean, 6 of his 9 wins, he's 9-0. 6 of them have come by knockout. But I think he has to cut off the ring, get to the body. And Keyshawn Davis, the one thing about him, he loves to destroy high guards. Nahir loves to use the high guard. But I think this one's going to go the distance because I think Nahir is way too tough. So I'm going to take Davis on points. Funny, last night, Bryan, I saw it for minus 118 on FanDuel. And hey, looks like I got all my bars back. Look at that, right?
Wow. I
like that.
Too. Keep going before it fucks up again.
a live stream. It might have just been some construction outside. But last night on FanDuel, the line for Keyshawn Davis on points was a minus 118. And looks like we can get it for a minus 102 now or minus 106. So it looks like that's a little bit better. But I do think Keyshawn Davis wins on points, and I think Nahir Albright is actually going to stay very, very close to him in this fight, and he's going to give him some problems. So I think this one is actually going to be a very, very entertaining bout. Final thoughts of this? Do you think we'll be talking about Keyshawn Davis a little bit more after this fight?
Yeah, I think he'll win going away for the most part. But like I said, while you weren't here, Nahir Albright got 3 rounds off of Jermaine Ortiz. I think he could get 1 or 2 off of Keyshawn Davis. And, hang in there and come away with not a win in terms of the win-loss record, but a win in terms of, hey, he, stood in there against Keyshawn Davis and, perhaps we'll see him again against somebody else because if he was able to hang in with the Jermaine Ortiz, if he's able to hang in with the Keyshawn Davis, we'll see him against another lightweight contender or prospect at some point.
Yeah, so, it's really interesting, but there's another guy that's kind of been in the spotlight, but I keep on thinking that he hasn't really fought anybody. I'm talking about Janibek Alimkhanuly, who will be fighting as well, straight up on the money line. He's a minus 1250, Bryan, against Vincenzo Gualtieri. There's a reason for that, who is a plus 630. Bryan, how do you see this fight going, and do you have a long breakdown for this one?
I don't have a long breakdown for this one, but I do have a breakdown for this one. I thought Vincenzo Gualtieri was going to lose his last fight, and that was for the vacant IBF middleweight title. This is going to be his first fight, my understanding is, away from Germany. So that's going to be interesting to look out for. And Janibek, while I think he's very good, very skilled, I think you're a little bit higher on him than I am.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason I'm not as high on him as some other people is because, one, I want to see him fight somebody at his level. I expected him to put away Denzel Bentley quickly, especially after Felix Cash did it in 3 rounds. He did not do that. Denzel Bentley did not only last all 12, but won probably 4 rounds or so against him. And on top of that, the middleweight division, as I often say, I was looking through this, Shantelle.
Yeah.
This is the worst the middleweight division's been in my lifetime. Because if you look through the champions of the middleweight division and my lifetime dates back to 1994, and I probably started watching boxing, 97, 98, 99, because I caught the end of the Felix Trinidad run because I'm Puerto Rican. That's what we did. And you're talking about, Trinidad, for one, was a middleweight champion. Bernard Hopkins was a middleweight champion. Oscar De La Hoya, Jermaine Taylor, Kelly Pavlik, on and on and on. And you go through recent years, and it's like, look at who's at the top of the middleweight division now. No disrespect, but I think this is the weakest the talent pool has been. And I think the division is waiting for someone to go ahead and grab it, and nobody truly is. So we'll see. But ultimately, I think Janibek minus 1250 is a lot. On DraftKings, it's minus 1800, which is also a lot. And honestly, I think that I expect kind of a Janibek Denzel Bentley type of performance. I think Janibek is going to win this on points at plus 250. I'm rolling with the decision here. Vincenzo Gualtieri has never been stopped. To my knowledge, hasn't been dropped, but I'm not going to sit here and say that I watched all of his other 22 or so fights in Germany. throughout his career. I've seen a few, but not every single one. So I don't know if he's been dropped. And BoxRec won't clarify that necessarily. But I think that he can survive this. I think if Janibek gets a stoppage, it's going to be late, round 7 through 12, which last I checked was in that plus 155 or so range or whatever the case may be. But I think there's a lot of value on a decision here, and I think it's realistic because I think while Janibek is good and maybe should get him out of there, he's facing a tough opponent. And I think that he needs a great performance to assert himself in what I think is a very weak weight class right now. So maybe he does that, but I think this is a tougher test than people are giving credit for.
Yeah, I think when we take a look at Janibek and his career, that fight against Denzel Bentley coming into it, I figured Denzel Bentley would give him some problems, but I didn't know that Janibek wouldn't get the stoppage in that fight. I was like, isn't he supposed to get the stoppage? Isn't that why they kind of put that fight together for him? But then again, he came back, great performance against the Canadian Stephen Butler. Right? Great performance. And
who should not have gotten a title shot at all.
No, but you know what? It was still a great performance. And don't hate on my fellow Canadian over there. Right?
Like that was a gross mismatch. I don't know how he got that title shot, but
shout out to Stephen Butler though. Come on the show. You know what I'm saying?
Referee didn't protect him well enough in that fight either.
They should have stopped that fight.
Unnecessary shots. So that's why I thought it was a mismatch. So it is what it is.
But for a guy like Janibek, I think he has all the attributes to be very dominant in the ring. And we saw what he did against Stephen Butler, even though despite the fact that it was a mismatch, I actually think this fight is a mismatch. Because I've taken a look at Gualtieri's fights as well against Falcao. Listen, this guy, he does have skill, but not enough against someone like Janibek. He barely has any head movement. He gets hit a lot. I'll give him the fact that he has a nice straight right. He has a nice left hook, but even then there's no pop. He has no power, and he gets hit a lot. Janibek is going to come and hit him with nasty uppercuts, and it's going to be game over because he gets hit in the face all the time. He's not protecting himself, and he's kind of flat-footed. I feel
he's kind of awkward too, though. You don't think his awkwardness is going to be a little bit of an issue for Janibek?
I think Janibek is going to be walking him down, and I think that Gualtieri is going to be getting popped in the face time after time because his head movement is borderline terrible against a guy like. If Janibek doesn't get a knockout or stoppage in this fight, I'm going to be thoroughly disappointed, and then I'm going to hop off the Janibek train. I'm just going to get off of it because he should stop this guy when you just talk about skill set. And it's no disrespect to a guy like Gualtieri because, listen, like you mentioned, this is his first fighting away from Germany, right? So that's already a big, massive deal for him. And he's going to be on the main event. Like, this is huge for him. And he does have skill. And I said he does have a nice straight right and a nice left hook. But other than that, like when you talk about skill set, I don't think he stands a chance in this fight. And I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to go alternate betting rounds 1 through 6 plus 340 because the way that Gualtieri leaves himself exposed, Janibek is going to make him pay. So I'm going to take him to get the knockout plus 340. Lots of value there. Bryan's pick, I'm not mad at that. Listen, Gualtieri, like the head movement bothers me. I could even see it being round 7 through 12, but the fact that the guy's not protecting himself and getting popped in the face by Falcao that much, I was like, it's game over. Like, I'm watching the highlights last night, right? I'm like, I'm not going to take any notes for this. That's how I prepare. I'm just going to watch his highlights again and check it out. And I'm just like, he doesn't stand a chance, man. And if Janibek does not knock him out, and it's like a Stephen Butler performance, which you kind of foreshadowed it could be, I'm going to be disappointed.
Yeah, it's almost like what we're basically telling the people. What we're telling y'all is this is either going to be a Stephen Butler Janibek performance or a Denzel Bentley Janibek performance with little room for in between. It's either going to be a quick knockout where he proved that he's, the boogeyman, so to speak, in the division, or it's kind of like, hey, he didn't put away Vincenzo Gualtieri, which, and I'll say this too, as far as like unification bouts, because this is a unification bout, we should mention. Yeah. Janibek has a title and Vincenzo Gualtieri has a title. Not the most headline popping unification bout this sport could put forth. But I will be watching. I kind of want more from the middleweight division. I want more. I want more from everybody at 160 because this division needs a jolt badly. So if this could become even a fight of the year candidate, which I don't foresee, that would be great. But I think we both have this being relatively one-sided,
Yeah.
just with two completely different endings.
So we're going to see who's right. By the way, if you have any comments on any of these fights, how you're going to be betting, drop them in the chat. We want to hear from you. I am PK13. You guys are at it early today. I am PK13, a friend of the show. Thank you so much for rocking with us. And let us know how you're going to bet this fight as well. Also, Joseph says, what's up? You know the thing about Joseph, he comes on the show, he only says hi to Bryan. And every time, and he'll be like, bye, Bryan. He might be your biggest fan. So give a shout out to Joseph as well. Thank you for rocking with us and joining us.
Shout out to Joseph. Thank you everybody for watching. We just talked about Keyshawn Davis and Nahir Albright, and we also just talked about Janibek Alimkhanuly and Vincenzo Gualtieri. Hopefully I got those names pronunciations correct. Not the easiest thing to do in this sport, but we have one more fight to discuss. If you missed the conversations on those two fights, you can go back and look and overcome the little bit of Wi-Fi trouble that we had early on. Live streams, it happens sometimes, but we have one more fight to get into, which I think, Shantelle, is actually the fight of the weekend.
Yeah, and it's actually a fight that I think is going a little bit under the radar. It might be because it's in Australia, so it might be getting overshadowed. But I also think, really quickly, the top rank card is actually pretty solid. I do really, really like the top rank card. But the fight that I'm talking about is Tszyu and Bryan Mendoza. Tszyu straight up on the money line, a -750. Bryan Mendoza, a +450. And my biggest question to you, Bryan Fonseca, so we don't get it twisted, it's not Bryan Mendoza over here. Is it a little bit disrespectful to a guy like Mendoza to have that line, Tszyu -750, Bryan Mendoza +450, who recently knocked out Sebastian Fundora in a fight where he was not slated to win? A lot of people had Fundora winning that fight going into it. He was supposed to be like the golden child, right? When you take a look at how his size and his length, but he fights like he's 5'2". Bryan Mendoza walked in, boom, popped him, and now we're talking about a different fight.
Which we talked about on the show, by the way. We said Sebastian Fundora because he insists on fighting like he's Arturo Gatti instead of Sebastian Fundora. This is why Paul Williams got popped by Sergio Martinez. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also this is a fight that is also happening because let's keep it real. A Charlo brother chose not to fight Tszyu. It was Jermell. He decided to, you know what? I would get the bag as well, though. Like if I'm trying to fight for money at this point in my career, like Jermell's what, 33?
Rather lose to Canelo Alvarez and Tszyu.
Come on,
I'm telling you that right now.
It's a bigger
Not
fight.
that he would lose to Tszyu, although I think that would be very competitive.
Yeah, I don't know who I would take in that fight. Just thinking about it right now, I might lean towards Tszyu. But listen, Mel took the money fight, so Tszyu fighting Bryan Mendoza. Bryan, how are you betting this one? And do you think it's disrespectful to line to a guy like Bryan Mendoza?
I think so. This is a similar line that Sebastian Fundora had against Bryan Mendoza, and I think it may have been actually a little wider. I think Sebastian Fundora was -1,000 and Bryan Mendoza was +600 at the time we at least talked about it, something along those lines. And I said Sebastian Fundora by decision is safe, but you want to sprinkle on the Bryan Mendoza knockout. We both co-signed that, and it ended up playing out. Now, in the defense of the odds makers, Bryan Mendoza before that knockout was losing basically every round, at least according to the judges. Not sure I agreed with that, but he was listed as doing so, and he found the opening and cashed. I think Tszyu is just better than Sebastian Fundora. I think he's a better all-around fighter. I think if this is like the Tony Harrison fight and this is in Australia, then the ring is going to be small. And if that's the case, then Tszyu is going to be able to get to Bryan Mendoza a little bit early, but I don't think he wants to trade punches with Bryan Mendoza liberally in the way that he probably would have with Tony Harrison, who's been knocked out a few times in the past, at least prior to when they fought. So I am actually leaning, because of all those things, I'm still leaning Tszyu by knockout. but I didn't go by knockout straight up. I'm going with round 7 through 12 because I think Bryan Mendoza is very tough, has not been knocked out before. I think if he gets stopped, which I do think he will, because again, I'm expecting there to be a small ring because Tszyu in Australia, I've seen some small rings that he fights in, but also Tszyu is excellent body puncher, like excellent body puncher. Great pressure fighter, is smart. He takes chances, but I don't find him to be horribly irresponsible with the chances he takes, at least so far against competition. I thought Tony Harrison had some success early, but he was able to break him down as the fight went on. I think he can get to Bryan Mendoza between rounds 7 through 12 at plus 155 on FanDuel as of this recording, plus 140, plus 150. I've seen it elsewhere, so you're getting pretty good value there. That's the only knockout that I picked. I'm not saying it's the only knockout that will happen amongst these 3 big fights, because there's a world where all 3 of them could be knockouts. There's also a world where all 3 of them could be decisions. I feel like method of victory is very close here despite the favorites. I just beat the shit out of my microphone. So I'm going with Tszyu.
It's been one hell of a morning for us.
Yeah. Going Tszyu by knockout between rounds 7 through 12. And since this is in Australia, I think it's going to be Sunday here on the North American side. So hopefully it doesn't interfere with any football, but we'll see. We'll see how the time goes, because I don't even know what the start time is as of right now. I'm definitely
going to have I have double screen anyway on Sundays. Like I have triple screen sometimes. So I'll find a way to get it up on the
Red
TV.
Zone's all you need.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Red Zone's always on. But sometimes you want to have 2 games on at the same time as well, if it's a good one.
Yeah, sure.
So for this fight, so tail of the tape, if anyone's like really wondering, Tszyu 23-0, 17 of those wins coming by way of knockout. Bryan Mendoza 22-2, 16 of those wins coming by way of knockout. Both of these guys have pop. Some similar fight styles as well. They're both really aggressive. They both really like to come forward. For those 2 losses for Bryan Mendoza, listen, one of them was a unanimous decision win by Jesus Ramos, but that was a fight that Mendoza took with like 10 days notice, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't even count that one on his record. I'm just like, okay, well, he took that 10 days notice. That just shows to me that he's not afraid to fight anybody. Like going into that fight against Fundora, he was the underdog. Going into this fight, a massive underdog as well. He's really, really tough. He's never been stopped before. And I think his best punch, which I think he'll be able to land on a guy like Tszyu, is actually his left hook. And that's the one with power, right? That's the one that knocked Jason Rosario on his ass. Didn't stop him, but that was the left hook. Actually, no, it was the uppercut. So yeah, he's got a nice uppercut too. But listen, it was the uppercut that got Jason Rosario on the ground. And that was a fight where I think he was an underdog against a guy like Jason Rosario as well. So he's got this underdog mentality, but he's on a 3-fight TKO KO streak coming into this one. And the reason why I mentioned that Rosario fight is because Bryan Mendoza is also tactical. Like he'll reel you in and pop you when you don't expect it. And that's exactly what happened into Rosario. He walked into that uppercut. So, the thing about him is he sets traps really well. And I think that's what he's going to try to do to Tszyu. But Tszyu, he's skilled. Right? He knows how to cut off the ring. He knows how to throw nasty combos. His uppercut is nasty. He has real pop to him. And the one thing is like Tszyu has been dropped before. Right? That's the one thing. So Bryan Mendoza, I think he'll be able to land the left hook is because Tszyu, he kind of has like a wide stance at times and he kind of lets in left hooks. Like that's the one punch that he lets in a lot. So if Bryan Mendoza is able to land on him, and I think he will be, I think it might kind of shake Tszyu a bit. But I do have Tszyu winning this one because I think all around he might be a little bit too much for Bryan Mendoza near the end. I think it's going to be a war though. It's going to be back and forth. These guys are going to be coming because Tszyu is going to be trying to come forward and Bryan Mendoza is going to be trying to set his traps. And this is going to be an aggressive fight. Both these guys have pop. Both these guys are going to be going at it and throwing bombs. I'm going to love to see the total punches at the end of each round. If there's a way that you can bet on that as well, see what the over-under is, how many punches.
Prize Picks might have it, actually.
Yeah, and sometimes those don't come on until closer to the fight. But because I think Bryan Mendoza is so tough and he's never been stopped before, I'm actually going to go Tszyu by points at plus 182. Some value there. it's easy. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Tszyu got the knockout, but I just think Bryan Mendoza is that tough. He's that tough, and he's fought very well his last 3 fights, coming into this one in confidence. Going to be fighting in Australia. So I just think it's going to be a very, very good fight, very entertaining, back and forth. And I think Tszyu is probably going to be winning on the cards a lot of the time, but I think Bryan Mendoza could steal a round or two. And if he's able to land a big one on Tszyu, let's see what happens, because Tszyu has been dropped before. So I'm going Tszyu by points, plus 182.
Let's go to Ace 317 here. Tszyu reminds me a little bit of the same style and hype Errol Spence had when he was coming up. That is interesting, Ace, because I was just thinking about this the other day. Yeah. The second fight I ever covered in person, because the first one, as I mentioned, was Santa Cruz Frampton 1, Barclays Center, July 30th, 2016. Still one of the best cards I've seen live. The second one was August 21st, Coney Island Amphitheater. And this is right before boxing was dead in New York for about 5 months because of legal shit. And Errol Spence was the main event, who knocked out Leonard Bundu on NBC right after the Olympics. And that was like the highest rated PBC fight for a while. It still might be in terms of on like, you know, television, not pay-per-view or whatever the case may be. And that was a ridiculously good knockout. Also featured Heather Hardy versus Shelly Vincent the first time.
Solid fight.
Yeah, it was a solid card. Young Abraham Nova was on that card. Also, some good fighters.
Let's stay on that for a little topic before we get up and out of here. By the way, guys, if you guys have any picks of who's going to win these fights, please let us know. A couple of technical issues early on for the Keyshawn Davis, Nahir Albright fight. But before we get up and out of here, I do want to ask you, so many fights in Australia, but I feel like there was only one in New York, and that was Teofimo Lopez and Josh Taylor. How do you feel about there not being a lot of fights in New York this year? Because we're at the end of the year, and it's like, what's going on? There was a rumor about Arislandi Lara and Danny Garcia that was supposed to happen at the Barclays, never happened. And Australia is getting all these massive fights, which is good for them, because, you know, you see the crowd, it's mad hype, but it's like, it's weird not to have fights in New York. Like, even as a viewer watching at home, I'm like, is it weird for you?
I mean, we're getting fights in New York, but like they ain't at the big venues. We just had one last night. Cletus Selden won at Sony Hall, promoted by Larry Goldberg. So that's
I'm talking about like the blockbuster fights, though.
But like this is what I'm saying. Right? It's like, look at the fights coming up in New York: Paramount Theater, Edison Ballroom, Melrose Ballroom. We got the MSG Theater, but that's on a Thursday. And that's going to be on UFC Fight Pass. Tom Loeffler is actually behind that, and that's not a big fight. And it's like Brian Ceballos on that card. That's interesting. But there's nothing from MSG Barclays Center. We have not had a fight at the Barclays Center since October of 2022. That was Deontay Wilder, Robert Helenius knockout. When Barclays Center would have several fights in a year, and this is this isn't the episode for me to go off on this, but it's bad. Like, it's so bad right now. We're not developing fighters here. Richardson Hitchens had his main event against Jose Zepeda, and that was in Orlando. That should have been in New York. That should have been at least at the MSG Theater, if not maybe the Barclays Center. But Barclays Center tends to only do PBC fights. I don't know what the fuck is going on. But we're not getting big fights in New York. Otherwise, I'd be at a lot more shit. I've been at more press conferences than I've been at actual fights this year, because they do the tour and they have to bring people to New York. And Canelo Charlo's in New York. Tank Ryan, they're in New York. Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence, they're in New York. But in terms of fight cards I've done in person, Justin Teofimo Lopez won and Edgar Berlanga. That's really it.
Yeah, you know what? Hopefully there's some more fights so Bryan can attend those fights as well. We'll definitely try to get you some more contact. Before we get up and out of here, we got to go to a friend of the show, IMPK13. Did you guys see that Bomac got out of jail on a suspended sentence? We did. We messaged each other right away, and I'm pretty sure we did. I remember seeing that and being like, okay, well, I'm happy for Bomac, because I was a little bit worried. I'm not going to lie to you. You know, kind of shook my head at the situation, because I'm like, but I'm happy that Bomac is free.
You don't want to get arrested. You definitely don't want to get arrested overseas. So look, Bomac is back for the time being, so all is well, seemingly.
Janibek is the boogeyman at 160. We're going to find out.
We'll see.
We're going to find out. He better get the knockout.
Listen. Somebody has to be the boogeyman in this fucking division. I don't like. Am I bugging, chat? Because I don't think this weight class has got it right now. I don't think middleweight is strong at all. I think somebody needs to come through and just dominate everybody, because the champions of middleweight right now are basically Vincenzo Gualtieri, Janibek, Jermall Charlo, Adames. You know what I mean? I'm missing somebody, but does it even matter at this point? Gennady Golovkin had 2 titles and vacated both of them. I think Arislandi Lara has a title right now, middleweight, because the super champs, interim, regular, whatever. I don't know what the fuck is going on in the sport anymore.
Man, someone had
middleweight division is not great. I might argue that Arislandi Lara beats all these guys, even now.
I like Lara a lot. I wish we would have got that Danny Garcia fight. I was going to say, though, I saw this tweet. This is totally off topic. And now that we're done betting, there is a picture of like Triple G. And he was just wearing a jacket in the store. And someone's like, just give up the belts, man. Because he's not doing anything, right? This division is just... it's not the most exciting, but hopefully Janibek gets the knockout this weekend, has a statement victory. Bryan and I on opposite ends there. But if you've been rocking with the show, thank you so much. If you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button. Also follow us on our social media channels. We're at TheMandatory TKO. We'll be back with some more boxing content next week. But until then, enjoy.
Jorge Linares.
Sleeper fight. Jorge Linares might give him some problems. Is Jack Catterall overrated? We're going to get into all of that. Those are just some conversations that Bryan and I have when we're not live on the show. But thank you so much for rocking with us. We'll be back next week. And until then, enjoy our predictions. And if you're going to be betting on the fights, drop your slips. We want to see how much you're winning. If you made a different bet than us, if you want to get on us for a bad pick, if we made a bad pick, let us know. It's all fun and games. Bryan, before we get up and out of here, any final thoughts?
Enjoy the fights this weekend and don't bet too much money that you're unwilling to part with.